The moment I stepped outside, everything in me froze. There, in the far corner of our backyard, under the blistering afternoon sun, sat a metal cage. Inside it, curled up, shaking and drenched in sweat, was my little girl. Her face was streaked with tears, her cheeks an alarming shade of red. She clutched the bars with her tiny fingers, reaching toward me, mouthing words I couldn't hear, because her hearing aids were gone. My legs buckled. I dropped to my knees and scrambled toward her, my heart slamming against my chest. She was trying to speak, but without her cochlear implants, she was lost in silence. Her lips trembled. "Mommy." She finally whimpered. The mean lady said I was too loud. She said I needed a timeout. My vision blurred with rage and disbelief. The mean lady was our HOA president, the same woman who had complained about my daughter's singing just days before. And now she had broken into our yard, stripped my disabled child of her ability to hear, and locked her in a cage like an animal. My daughter, only 5 years old, was being punished for having joy. That day, something inside me broke, and something else came alive. Emma was born with profound hearing loss. From the moment we received the diagnosis, our lives became a delicate dance of therapies, specialist visits, and prayers for progress. She got her cochlear implants when she was 2, and it changed everything. The first time she responded to my voice, I cried for an hour. As she grew, she discovered a deep love for music, something she couldn't fully hear but could feel. Vibrations, rhythms, the hum of life. It made her light up in ways nothing else did. She would sing her own made-up songs, off-key and loud, but full of joy. That joy became her outlet, her confidence, her way of connecting to a world that didn't always understand her. We moved to Evergreen Meadows after my husband passed away. He was Emma's biggest fan, always dancing along to her silly songs in the kitchen. After losing him, I needed a fresh start. This neighborhood had great schools and was close to Emma's new therapy center. It looked like the kind of place that promised peace, neat lawns, quiet streets, smiles from strangers. But beneath the manicured hedges and community newsletters was something uglier. From day one, Patricia, the HOA president, made it clear we didn't belong. She never smiled at Emma. She never asked about her implants. Instead, she offered tight-lipped warnings about noise ordinances and preserving the community atmosphere. At first, I tried to reason with her, explain that Emma sometimes had trouble regulating her voice, especially when she was excited or when music stirred something in her. But Patricia didn't care. To her, Emma wasn't a child who deserved patience. She was a disruption. And despite the sunshine and pretty fences, I could feel a chill whenever Patricia was near. Still, nothing prepared me for what she would do next. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where everything feels almost too calm. Emma was in the backyard with her little pink piano, tapping out a song she had just made up about butterflies and pancakes. Her voice floated through the open window, off-key, bright, and utterly hers. I was in the kitchen packing her lunch when I heard a knock on the front door. Not just a knock, a sharp, impatient pounding. I wiped my hands and opened it to find Patricia standing there, arms crossed, lips pursed, looking as though she'd bitten into a lemon. "Your daughter is making that awful noise again," she said, without so much as a hello. I blinked, taken aback. "She's just playing. She doesn't always know how loud she is." Patricia leaned in slightly, her voice cool and clipped. "This is the 3rd time this week. We have rules in this neighborhood. Noise levels are to be kept reasonable during work hours. My husband is on conference calls. He can't concentrate with that screeching." I swallowed hard. "She's not screeching, she's singing. And she's deaf. She can't always control the volume." Disability isn't a free pass to disturb others, she snapped. We all have to live here. My face flushed with a mix of anger and shame. She's 5 years old. She's doing her best. Patricia handed me a printed notice, an official HOA warning. Keep her quiet, or there will be fines. I stood frozen as she turned and walked away, heels clicking down the path like punctuation marks to her threat. I closed the door and stared at the warning in my hand. Emma's laughter still drifted in from the backyard, unaware that someone saw her joy as a problem to be silenced. I didn't want a fight. I wanted peace, for Emma to have space to grow, to sing, to be herself. But that morning, as I looked at that paper and back toward my little girl dancing by the flowers, I realized peace might not be possible here. Not while Patricia was watching, waiting, and judging from just beyond the fence. Later that afternoon, just as I was finishing up dishes, my phone rang. It was my supervisor, panic in his voice. A client was threatening to pull out of a major contract, and I was the only one who had handled their case from the start. We need you on this now, he said. I worked remotely as a customer service manager, and while I usually managed to balance work and motherhood, there were moments like this where everything collided. I hesitated, glancing toward the window. Emma was still in the backyard, happily pressing the keys of her toy piano, swaying to her own rhythm. Her cochlear implants glinted in the sunlight. She was safe, fenced in, just steps from the house. I'll take the call from my office, I said, pulling up the files I needed and putting on my headset. I made sure the back door was locked and that I could see Emma from my window. It would only be an hour, 2 at the most. She had her water bottle, her music, her bunny. It was her favorite spot in the world. I gave myself permission to believe that everything would be okay. I just needed to get through this emergency, and then I'd be back with her. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that someone else was watching too. And while I was focused on saving a client account, someone was plotting something cruel right in my own backyard. 20 minutes into the call, I glanced out the window to check on Emma. Her piano sat still. Her stuffed bunny lay slumped beside it, ears flattened in the grass. But Emma wasn't there. I leaned closer to the glass, scanning the yard. Maybe she'd gone behind the oak tree. She liked to collect acorns there. Maybe she was just crouched low, examining a bug, or lost in one of her pretend games. I told myself not to panic. I stayed on the line, nodding through the conversation, pretending to be focused while my eyes searched every corner of the backyard. 10 more minutes passed. No sign of her. I pressed mute and called her name. Emma? My voice rose, uncertain. Nothing. Emma! I pulled off my headset, heart racing now. I ran through the house and burst out the back door, calling louder, trying not to let the fear creep too far into my voice. The air was still, oppressively hot, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin. But all I could feel was the absence, that hollow space where Emma should have been. Then faintly I heard it, a muffled cry. It came from somewhere behind the garden shed. My feet moved before I had time to think. My mind raced with every awful possibility. I turned the corner, and that's when I saw it. What no mother should ever have to see. My baby girl, locked inside a cage, her small body curled in a ball, lips trembling, eyes pleading for help. My breath caught in my throat. The metal cage was large, rusted and ugly, meant for a dog, not a child. It sat squarely in the dirt behind the shed, away from any shade. The sun beat down mercilessly on its surface, making it glint like something forged in a nightmare. Inside, Emma was curled up, her arms hugging her knees, her forehead pressed to her legs. Her hair clung to her cheeks in damp clumps, and her face was flushed a dangerous red. Her cochlear implants, those lifelines to the world, were gone, lying just outside the cage door, tossed carelessly into the dust like discarded trash. I dropped to my knees, hands gripping the bars as she looked up, blinking, unsure if it was really me. "Mommy?" Her voice cracked, hoarse. "I can't hear. The mean lady took my ears away." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the cage apart with my bare hands. But I had to stay focused. "I'm here, baby. I'm getting you out." I tugged at the door, only to find it secured with a thick bicycle lock. My fingers shook as I sprinted to the garage, flinging open drawers and knocking over bins until I found the bolt cutters. My hands were so slick with sweat, I nearly dropped them. I ran back, fell to my knees again, and squeezed the cutters over the lock with every ounce of strength I had. The lock gave way with a loud snap. I flung the door open, and Emma collapsed into my arms, her small body trembling with silent sobs. I cradled her, whispering that she was safe, that Mommy had her, all while rage bubbled so hot in my chest, I thought I might burst. Between hiccuped breaths, she told me what happened. Patricia had come into our yard. She called Emma's singing ugly noise, told her deaf people shouldn't sing, then removed her implants and shoved her into the cage for a time out. Those words, said so innocently, broke me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was cruelty, deliberate and targeted. I carried Emma inside, wrapped her in cold towels, gave her sips of water, and kissed her burning forehead. She was safe now. But I wasn't done. Patricia had crossed a line no one comes back from, and I was going to make sure the world knew it. With Emma resting on the couch, her little body swaddled in damp cloths, I marched out the front door. My fists were clenched so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. I didn't care who saw me. I didn't care what neighbors might think. I pounded on Patricia's door with the force of every mother's fury that's ever burned through history. Her husband, Daniel, answered, confused, blinking behind his glasses. "Can I help you?" he asked cautiously. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice shaking but firm. "Who?" "Your wife. The woman who just locked my disabled daughter in a dog cage and left her to bake in the sun." His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" Before I could answer, Patricia stepped into view behind him, arms folded, her expression flat and annoyed, like I was the inconvenience in her day. "Your daughter was disturbing the neighborhood again," she said coldly. "I simply gave her a time out since you clearly don't discipline her." Daniel turned to her, horror spreading across his face. "Patricia, what did you do?" She didn't flinch. "Don't look at me like that, Daniel. That child has been a nuisance since they moved in, always making those awful, high-pitched sounds. Someone had to teach her that actions have consequences." I took out my phone. "The police are on their way, and you should know. Our backyard security camera caught everything." Her composure cracked for the first time. She blinked. "You're lying. There's no camera." I turned the screen toward her. The footage played in silence. Patricia entering the yard, approaching Emma, yanking the implants from her ears as Emma flinched, crying. Patricia shoving her into the cage, locking it, and walking away as if she'd just cleaned her porch. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no words came. "You locked a 5-year-old deaf girl in a cage," I said, my voice steady and low. "And now you're going to pay for it." Minutes later, red and blue lights lit up the street. Officers took one look at Emma's condition and the footage before putting Patricia in handcuffs. She yelled that she was just enforcing noise rules, that I was exaggerating. But no one was listening to her anymore, not even Daniel. When the police arrived, I was standing at the edge of my driveway, still clutching my phone with the video paused on Patricia's cruelest moment. Emma sat inside with a neighbor who had rushed over when she saw the flashing lights. The officers barely needed to ask questions. I showed them the footage, explained what had happened, and within seconds, the lead officer's jaw tightened. "Where is the child now?" he asked. "In the living room. She's recovering. She was locked in a cage for nearly an hour in direct sun, with no hearing aids." Another officer stepped into the yard and inspected the cage, still sitting there, still hot to the touch. He returned moments later, his face grim. They went to Patricia's door. She answered, smug at first, arms crossed, clearly expecting a conversation. But that confidence vanished the moment they asked her to step outside. Her eyes darted to me, then to the officers. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. She was violating community noise regulations. I gave her a harmless time out. It's not a crime to want peace in your own neighborhood. "Ma'am," the officer replied firmly, "you forcibly removed a medical device from a minor, confined her in a metal cage, and left her unsupervised in extreme heat. That is false imprisonment, child endangerment, and potentially a hate crime." They cuffed her right there on her front lawn as neighbors began to gather, watching in stunned silence. Patricia screamed that she was being persecuted, that she was only upholding the HOA's standards. But her words fell flat, drowned out by the weight of her actions. As the cruiser doors slammed shut behind her, I felt something shift in the air. Justice had begun, and Patricia was finally facing the consequences of her cruelty. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights felt too bright, too sterile against the rawness of what we had just endured. Emma lay on the bed, an IV in her tiny arm, her skin still flushed from the heat, her eyes half closed with exhaustion. The doctor's voice was gentle but serious. She was dehydrated, suffering from heat exhaustion. If she had been out there any longer, he said quietly, her organs could have started to shut down. I nodded numbly, holding her hand, trying to stay strong. But when she finally drifted into sleep, her lips murmuring a broken tune without sound, I broke. I wept, right there at her bedside, for all that she had suffered and for how close I had come to losing her. By that evening, word of what happened had spread through the neighborhood. One by one, people began to show up at the hospital. A woman I'd only waved to in passing brought a stuffed bear. A man who lived 3 houses down arrived with takeout and a quiet apology. Mr. Chen, who lived across the street, placed a soft hand on my shoulder. "We're so sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "She's bullied all of us, but we never thought she'd do something like this." Another neighbor, Maria, wiped tears from her cheeks as she spoke. She threatened to fine me when my husband's oxygen machine was too loud. He was dying of lung cancer, and she said the hum was disturbing her evenings. The stories poured out. A boy with autism who wasn't allowed to hang a swing. A veteran who was told to remove his American flag. An elderly woman who had to dig up her butterfly garden. Patricia had ruled the neighborhood like a petty dictator. But no one had dared stand up to her, until now. That night, in the quiet hum of the hospital room, surrounded by unexpected kindness, I realized something had changed. Patricia had tried to break us, but instead, she had woken a community that was no longer afraid to stand together. The next morning, as the sun rose over a world that somehow kept turning, Daniel showed up at the hospital. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his shoulders slumped with a kind of guilt that clung to him like fog. He waited quietly by the nurse's station until I noticed him. I didn't want to see him, not after what his wife had done. But something in his expression stopped me from turning away. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I swear to you, I didn't know she was capable of something like that." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, waiting. "I filed for divorce this morning," he said, the words dropping like stones. "I'm selling the house. You'll never have to see either of us again." Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. "It's not enough," he said quickly, "but it should cover Emma's hospital bills and therapy. I can't undo what happened, but I can try to make it right." I nodded, barely able to speak, and for a moment, there was nothing left to say. Patricia had destroyed everything around her, including the only person still willing to stand by her. When we returned home from the hospital a few days later, something was different. The air felt lighter. The silence, once tense and watchful, now felt calm, almost welcoming. As we stepped into our backyard, I stopped in my tracks. The cage was gone. In its place stood something beautiful, a music garden. Wind chimes of every size swayed gently in the breeze, producing soft tones that shimmered through the yard. A small, waterproof keyboard sat beneath a new canopy of shade. Vibrating sound pads had been installed in the ground, so Emma could feel music beneath her feet. Someone had even painted a mural on the shed wall, bright colors swirling into musical notes dancing toward the sky. The neighbors had done all of it. A new fence had been put up, tall and sturdy, with a security system so advanced I couldn't believe it had all happened in just a few days. But the biggest change was still to come. The HOA held an emergency meeting. Patricia was unanimously removed as president. In her place, the community elected Maria, the woman whose husband had once needed oxygen to breathe. Her first motion? Creating policies that ensured accessibility and inclusion for families with disabilities. People who had once been too afraid to speak now had a voice. Lawns grew more colorful with personal touches. Gardens, flags, chalk art from children. Wheelchair ramps appeared. Basketball hoops returned. Signs in windows began to show the American Sign Language symbol for welcome. It wasn't just about Emma anymore. It was about everyone who had been silenced, scolded, or pushed aside. The neighborhood had woken up. And in doing so, they gave my daughter, and others like her, a reason to believe they truly belonged. Even with the community transformed and Patricia gone, the shadows of what happened clung tightly to Emma. She wouldn't step foot into the backyard, not even when I offered to hold her hand. She'd stare out the window at the new music garden, her little face expressionless, and quietly turn away. At night she'd cry in her sleep, caught in nightmares where she was locked up again and no one came. The worst was when she refused to wear her cochlear implants. She'd stare at them like they were the enemy, a reminder of the day she was punished for having a voice. No amount of gentle coaxing helped. Her fear had taken root deep inside. I found a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery for deaf children. From the first session, she focused on Emma's world, on using art, movement, and tactile sound to help her reclaim her joy. Slowly, my daughter began to open up. She painted the cage in her memories over and over, sometimes in flames, sometimes transformed into a butterfly. One day during a session, she touched a drum with her bare feet and smiled. That was the turning point. She began tapping on her little keyboard again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. We celebrated small victories. A minute in the backyard, wearing her implants for an hour, singing a little hum in the shower. Each step forward was a quiet miracle. I stopped focusing on trying to return to normal and started building something new with her. Something stronger, rooted in patience and love. Emma didn't forget what happened. But day by day, she stopped letting it define her. The girl who had once been silenced was learning how to feel safe in her own voice again. And that voice was slowly rising, steady and brave. 3 months after the incident, Patricia's lawyer reached out with a plea deal. She would plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. No prison time, just probation and community service. The offer made my stomach turn. I looked at my daughter, still waking up with nightmares, still flinching when she heard the front gate open. There was no universe where I could let Patricia walk away without truly facing what she'd done. I refused the deal, and thankfully, the district attorney stood by me. "This isn't just child endangerment," she told me. "This is a hate crime against a disabled child. We're going for the maximum." 6 months after that day in the yard, the trial began. The courtroom was cold and impersonal, but the moment I stepped up to testify, the world shrank to one terrible memory. I told them everything. What I saw, what Emma said, what we endured afterward. When the prosecution played the security footage, you could hear a collective gasp. Emma, so small, backing away in fear as Patricia loomed over her. The ripping out of her implants, the click of the lock, the satisfied smirk as Patricia turned her back and walked away. One juror, a mother herself, openly cried. Patricia's defense tried to paint her as concerned, responsible, even protective. They claimed she thought Emma was unsupervised and simply wanted to keep her safe until I returned. But the video shattered that lie. There was no concern in her face, only cold calculation. It took the jury just 90 minutes to return a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. False imprisonment, child endangerment, and yes, committing a hate crime against a person with a disability. At sentencing, the judge didn't mince words. "You locked a deaf child in a cage, stripped her of her ability to hear, and left her to suffer in the heat because you didn't like the sound of her joy. Your actions show a complete lack of humanity." He sentenced her to 7 years in prison, mandatory psychological counseling, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting us or serving in any leadership role in any community again. As she was led away in handcuffs, our eyes met. For the first time, I saw fear in hers. She finally understood what it meant to be powerless. A year later, Emma is 6 years old. She still has moments of fear, still checks the locks twice before going outside, still asks me to sit nearby when she plays in the yard. But her smile has returned. Her music has too. It started slowly, humming as she colored, tapping out little tunes on her keyboard during therapy, swaying to wind chimes with her eyes closed. Now she plays with purpose. She sings with joy. And when her voice cracks or grows too loud, no one flinches. Instead, neighbors stop to listen. The neighborhood is unrecognizable from the place we first moved into. Lawns have become canvases for individuality, flower beds bursting with color, ramps built by volunteers, toys scattered across driveways. The strict conformity that Patricia enforced has been replaced by a quiet celebration of difference. And every home now displays the same small sign in its window, the American Sign Language symbol for welcome. Last weekend, we hosted the first annual Evergreen Inclusion Festival in the park. There were booths on accessibility, games for kids of all abilities, and a silent disco where deaf and hearing children danced side by side, using vibration vests and colored lights. Emma was the star of the show, performing a song she wrote herself on her new keyboard. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, not because her notes were perfect, but because her spirit was. That day, Maria gave me a small plaque. It read, "Community isn't about rules, it's about belonging." And as I watched Emma laughing with new friends, hands signing words I didn't even know she'd learned, I felt something heal inside me. Patricia had tried to silence my daughter. Instead, Emma's voice helped awaken an entire community to the power of compassion, resilience, and inclusion. That night, after the festival, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and signed a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think the mean lady can hear music in jail?" Her hands moved slowly, gracefully, casting soft shadows in the dim glow of her nightlight. I paused, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart," I whispered. but I hope one day she learns to listen. Emma thought about that, her eyes drifting toward the ceiling. Everyone should get to hear music. She signed quietly, then closed her eyes. I sat there for a long while, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of her words settle into my heart. After everything she had endured, after the fear, the pain, the silence, she still believed in beauty, in second chances, in a world where even someone like Patricia might one day understand what she tried to destroy. Patricia had locked my daughter in a cage, but she hadn't broken her. Emma's spirit had soared beyond those bars, filling the neighborhood with music, lighting up hearts, and reminding us all what it truly means to belong. And that, more than anything, is her victory.